Hi, everyone. It's Mary, CMA Weekly. Um, and today we're going to have Sean Geehan talking to us about cabs and executive engagement. Um, Amy Sheaver's going to actually host the call, and I'm going to sit here and listen. Sean is open to having questions, and just throw them in the chat as you have them. And then when Amy finds a good opening, she's going to go ahead and just bring those up to him. And that's how we'll keep going. I'm just going to put everybody on mute in the meantime, but once we ask for questions in between, then you can take yourself off mute. All right. I don't.
Great.
So, Mary, while I'm sorry, go ahead, John.
Yeah, I want before I get started, I just want to ask if who I've got advisory boards on the agenda and the importance and how to essentially position them effectively within the executive suites to get buy-in and whatnot. Is there anything else around either cabs or exec programs out there that you definitely have questions for? Then I just want to make sure if I see those in the chat, I can kind of integrate that into the presentation along the way.
Yeah, and I'm going to do a real quick introduction while we're getting the slides going. So I'm Amy Sheaver. I know a lot of you folks. A lot of us used to meet many, many years ago in the Bay Area, and I'm not going to tell you the year because it was a long time ago. But we used to meet at AmDocs. I know Val Stevens on the call today, and we had Sean at a call at one of our in-person meetings at AmDocs, and I took all these really great notes, and people still ask me today for those notes. And it's really interesting because I've attended some different CAB webinars throughout the years, and I always go back to some of the best practices that Sean shared with us. Like, for example, when you're looking at customers to invite to your CAB program, things to consider like, oh yeah, maybe they're being invited to 10 or 14 other CAB programs. How can we make our CAB program really attractive and really appealing so that we can get the C-level customers to attend? And then once you get them there, how do you make your meeting really stand out so they're going to want to come back? And so today I thought I know a lot of the people on the call know the basic information about CAB programs. But one of the things that we're going to cover today, or Sean's going to cover today, is just how to define the strategy for your CAB programs. Is it about building advocates who can be ambassadors for your company? Or what are the pros and cons to having them meet to talk about about product feedback and reviewing the roadmap? And then if your company isn't necessarily set up for a formal CAB program based on what you hear today, I mean, there's a lot of things that will make a CAB program work, and then there's things that will make a CAB program fail. What are some of the options like TAB programs or customer-led advisory boards or other types of executive programs that your team could look at as alternative to formal CAB programs that do require a lot of resources and time? So I'm going to turn this over to Sean. I know that a lot of you may know about Sean. He's written books. He's done conferences on CABs. He's created some of the biggest CAB programs in Silicon Valley. He's facilitated a lot of these CAB programs. But I think you guys are going to find that his information is super valuable. And again, I will be looking through chat, and I'll insert some questions throughout the call today. All right, Sean, over to you.
All right, thank you very much. I'm actually working on my mobile phone while Mary's going to do the slides, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion. Again, like Mary said, if you have questions along the way, throw them in the chat. Let's make it a dialogue versus a monologue. over the course of the next. Amy said I had about 2.5 hours, but I'm going to keep it under 30 minutes or so already. So let's get started here. If you go to the next slide, just a little bit about some of the places that the objectives we want to do today. I think Amy covered these pretty nicely. If there's anything else, let me know. I'm also going to give away 5 books. So if you put your name in the chat some way, I'll let Amy and Mary determine who gets these books. But I'll give you a signed book, and it's got a lot about cabs, design, but also other executive programs to work with. And it also would include a one-on-one for a 15-minute, a 30-minute one-on-one. So if you're thinking about doing a cab, throw that in there, and we'll do something for you to just to talk you through that. So hopefully it'll give you a little bit of an idea of what you're looking at and what next steps are. So the next slide, it would be essentially just some people that we're working, that we worked with over the years. I didn't include everybody, so your logo is missing. You're on the call. I apologize, but clearly it's really weighted in technology. But we do a lot in healthcare. And obviously, it's a booming area, and a lot in the services area, a lot of SaaS modeling and things like that. At the end of the day, what we're trying to do is leverage the market directly into those who make decisions for their companies. And so from there, whether it's acquisitions they want to make, whether it's really launching new initiatives down some paths, reprioritizing or restructuring a business model, things like that is what we want to bring the customer market in and do this. And I think where people struggle is, how do we engage our execs in a meaningful way that's systemic, meaningful, and we can aggregate a lot of this data and convert it into something that can give us a differentiator. So that's the piece that we come in and do it. And there's so many tools you can use in marketing. On the next slide, you'll see. This is something I know everything's not included, but on the left is really the level of your customer base. Or prospects. So you have users, influencers, and decision makers. And across the top is really the sales process. And if you look at marketing, all these programs, this is where typically the marketing programs have the most impact. And so what we're looking at all of these. You're not going to get a CEO typically at a trade show, for instance. So know where you're positioning all of your programs and where a customer advisory council would fit in. And for today's purposes, I'll say executives. So typically it's VPs or higher, although there's some directors that have a lot of purchasing power, a lot of influence on your particular product set that you sell. Or solutions that you sell to companies, but typically I would say they're pretty higher level programs that we'll be talking about, because I think there's a lot of struggle with how do I get everybody to do that. Then the next slide, when I look at exec programs or customer programs as a whole, this is how they stack them up. And I'm throwing these out because I want you to know where a council is typically positioned. So if you have all your accounts at the bottom, your major account program should typically be about 10 to 25 or 30% of all your accounts. Your council of those major accounts, about a third of them will typically sit on an advisory council. All right. Then of those council members, typically you'll get 3 or 4, about a third of them will typically be executive sponsor program. And what I mean by that is they'll work directly with the innovation teams to really come up with some drive innovations or modeling. So it is really that's kind of how we stack up and look at programs. On the left, you see the incremental change. On the bottom 2 programs, it's more process. It might be, incremental changes, V1 plus 2, whatever it might be. Transformational changes where you want it on the top pieces. So we'll bring in chief technology officers, head of innovations, things like that at the senior level. So next, hopefully everybody has that. Any questions around that I'm happy to see where programs fall in and how you fight for certain budgets and position within each of these groups, because whoever leads marketing, that's typically you need to start with all the marketing programs and see where they fit at the various levels. So, and then at the end of the day, when we're looking at a council specifically, you have to come back and show proof that it is payoff for it. So when I'm coming to the table or helping a client sell it to an executive team, we got to say, what am I going to get out of this council? Why should I be interested? Why should I now prioritize or spend my time or ask the LT to spend their time working on this? So the next slide is essentially the scorecard that we start with, is to say, here are the deliverable. I'm sorry, this is a just as an example. If you go back one slide, I apologize. That's a program we worked on with Oracle years ago, and that's how all of the various levels. So when I the slides together about levels in the company, different types of programs and stages, that's how it was structured within Oracle. And just to stack it up, just to give you an idea of what's the practical application in the market there. And then the next slide is essentially, I've got to go in and sell a game plan. And here are areas of our business on the left. And then here are all the deliverables that the results and measurements. What we did is went to it's about 90 companies now that we're able to yield some level of data out of, and come up with these numbers. So these are realistic numbers, and it really depends on what your industry you're in, et cetera. But when they say what are the areas that a council can touch on, that's on the left, and how can it impact our business or those areas, that's what's on the right. And where I have at a level of confidence of, let's say, the numbers and the deliverables there, I put those in. If you're really struggling with, let's say, market alignment or internal pieces, I'd happy to have a conversation with you and tell you and give you some more guiding principles on that. But overall, this is your sales tool. I think these other sales tools are really important. I'll get into how to position to an executive in just a few minutes.
And
So
Sean,
next up is how we. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
one quick question is, as you're going through some of this, can you talk about how it relates to like a super large company that you worked with, like you mentioned Oracle, or is it realistic to also be looking at the same types of outcomes for smaller companies?
Yeah, I've found that it's a great question, and people ask all the time. So, for instance, some of the larger companies, you might break it into, let's say, Europe, uh, or APAC or the Americas. So it really depends, and it's almost how you're structured too as an organization. But really, it all translates. And I would say to you, it's always sexy to use the big names, so we use them for credibility purposes. But you'll on that slide you saw probably a lot of companies you didn't know, smaller companies. People love to have access of something that's new and different. And so there's some companies there that are even smaller. They were able to go get C-level people at surprisingly large customer bases. And I'll talk about how to position it. But people definitely want to make a difference. They want access to a key supplier. That's important. And it might be important to that individual's career. So it's got to be relevant from that standpoint.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
All right. And then next up is so here are the 8 areas. When we come into an organization, we look at these 8 areas of your advisory. So whether you haven't started yet or whether you're on the road to it, these are the 8 areas that I'll go over today. Kind of blast through these basically. And if you want anything meat behind it, happy to have a discussion. And the next slide, basically, I use this, it's kind of a scorecard. When I go through it, I'll give it's foundational, or you got a lot of work to do. You're on the move. You got some of the basics or criteria within that particular, let's say, executive involvement. or you're world class, you got all kinds of buy-in. The CEO or the head of the Americas, whoever is the exec sponsor, is involved, accessible, and supportive of the program. So, and the teams, the functional leaders within it are all on board as well. So that would give it a world class. If I have an executive aboard, but then even it's a CEO, but my product lead doesn't believe in it, it's, that's on the move. And then where it's just a train wreck, essentially no exec shows up and it becomes a marketing report that's handed out to somebody that essentially nobody reads and has little credibility, because it's not going to move the needle if they don't hear it directly from customers typically. So let's move to the next, if you could, Mary. So let's talk about executive involvement and connection to strategy. And I think when you're talking about advisory boards or councils, and by the way, I use councils and boards very, it's similar. I don't know there's a definition difference between the two. It really depends on what your CEO likes better. Whatever, when they smile at that, then oh, she likes council better, so let's use council. So I use those interchangeably. This is a big piece, and even if your chief marketing officer says, no worries, we're all on board, you've got to make sure that you're telling a story that's relevant to them. The levels of discussion have to be meaningful and relevant, and have content that allows a C-suite, the LT, get that information, digest it, and really move the needle on something. So if you can move ahead, I'll kind of combine these two. And how do you gain the support? Who should you invite from the company? Who should sponsor this or fund this advisory board? Where's the money coming from internally? And how does it align with corporate strategies? And finally, how do you keep your execs engaged? Because they're going to get pulled everywhere. So this is what I'll say, and in the next slides are going to kind of show you. One, we want to have meaningful impact to them. And now inside your organization, you may have different ways that you structure strategy. I try to keep it really simple, whether it's a SWOT or Venn diagrams that I can utilize to keep it high level as I move through an organization. Next to Mary. So this is essentially a Venn diagram, and I look at the market collective. This is your council on the top in the green. On the what you're looking at is your business model on the bottom left and your core competency today. So where these intersect all have different levels of priorities, and this is where you can, if you understand it, I think you sell it, position it more effectively within the organization. So if you move to the next slide, I'm going to give you a practical application. This is from a while ago, but in Wells Fargo, for instance, a spot this is a sweet spot. It's where the market wants it. It's aligned with the business model and your competency. So it's a no-brainer. Let's go do it. Here's where it gets tricky. The market wants it. It's in your business model. That's easy, but it's not a competency. So what do you do there? You go acquire it. Oracle acquired BEA a while ago. It was like 15 years ago. We were at a meeting, and we actually both were clients of ours. And Oracle had a competency that their customer base really wanted. It was in BEA and middleware. And essentially went and snagged them and put them over there. And that really came as an outcome of their counsel. And then if I look at on B, the evolve piece is it's not within your business model, but the market wants it. You do have some level of competency for it. So, the capability of moving from the old things to buying it up front to a SaaS model to subscription, whatever it might be, you've got things that you can do. For one services company, an IS, what we did was we bought blocks of time versus hours, and it helped on align themselves with more of the marketplace for budgeting purposes. So that piece was really good. It wasn't within their model to block and to sell blocks of time. It was just hourly billing. But the market wanted it so badly, we were able to make that happen. So, and then the bottom is easy, or not easy, but it's legacy systems. Eliminate those. The market doesn't want them anymore. Upgrade. I remember I was at a meeting one time, and we had a client supporting 7 generations ago. It was costing him an arm and a leg. And the CEOs or CIOs that were on this council were like, just tell my team you're moving. You have 2 years to get rid of anything that's beyond 3 generations ago, and they'll do it. My client was basically saying, oh, we couldn't do that. We'll lose our client. And I'm like, they just gave you the vote of confidence to go cut this out. And that saved them like hundreds of millions of dollars of support of going back and supporting that. So they gave the 2-year plan, made that happen, and they were able to reinvest those dollars into a next gen platform that really took their enablement to the next level. So these are the things that the CEO wanted to hear in the leadership team. They were scared to do that, so they were able to get rid of legacy systems, for instance. And these are big game changers because the C-suite won't do it. They don't want to. They think that the customers will be hacked off, but they got the support of their top 20 customers. In this case, was about 75% of the company's revenue. So once they had that, they were able to move ahead and literally move hundreds of millions of dollars into R&D versus legacy support systems. So those conversations, when you're having them, those are the ones that impact and really move the needle with your LT. So next up, this piece is big. The commitment for senior time and money is big. Scope out exactly how much time you need. From the CEO or the exec sponsor at the highest level, I need about 12 hours of their time in between meetings. For my champions, or like let's just say the BU head is the president of that division. I might need 10 to 12 hours of their time in between meetings. The next layer, I might probably need about 8 to 10 hours of the functional areas, unless the council has said this is an area that's very important to us. We might work more closely with you or members of your team. And then the money pieces, know that you got the budget up front, because you don't want to start one and then kill it. That really will hack off a customer base. Because you're basically saying to them it's not important enough. So, funding is big,
Sean,
and where the funding comes from is big.
a question came up about, in your experience, based on all the different companies you've worked with, where is the most effective place or group where the CAB or the initiative falls under? Has marketing typically been the most successful place that owns the CAB program, or have you found, working with a different group with different objectives, that it makes more sense to have it somewhere else?
Yeah, I think marketing is where it should be housed. Sales you need to really get sales. I really think this is a true bridge, chasm jumper, the connector between sales and marketing. If you run this and you get sales on board, they're going to love you. Credibility goes up with marketing when you have hitch to sales. And then between the two of you, going to product development is big, and then service. So those are the order you want. You and sales going lockstep into the C-suite is huge. So that and I think the CEO, she'll buy in on this if you're like, sales wants it because they got to go out and recruit, and then marketing and they can orchestrate it and make sure it all gets done in an organized way. So you need those two. As Sales is head of sales is just as important as the CEO. You've got to have them there and on board, and you want to do high impact light lifting. You want to bring them in when the real big decisions are. Let them have a lot of this credit on there and make it happen, but serve it up in a way that it's easy for them, it's simple, and it's digestible. So that's a really big piece there. I think I just saw something flash up about strategy. Your strategy definitely needs to be at the table. It In most instances, I find strategy, while it's a very important role, the individual doesn't necessarily have a lot of power. To sway sales and say, go do this. I find that the strategy people get excited about it. However, sales is typically the big dog wagging the tail, in because all roads lead through them to get to the customer usually. And then on I talked about the sponsor, getting their feedback and making them part of the process. And then on the budget pieces, I won't go over that. I'll go over that a little bit down the road. And I'll give you some basic numbers that people have that they're utilizing. If you go to the next slide, Mary. And this piece is to sell it internally. I think I went over a lot of this. But basically, you want, here's the big problem. What you don't want is a CEO going to one customer, coming back and making decisions based on, a sample size of 1 or 2 or 3. You want a collective. So whether it's 8 or 15, something like that all agree on these points typically and say, if you do this, we will be there. And it gives them much more of the confidence that they're going down the right path. And it's not just for one customer, it's basically for one either market, or it could be from all, but one market that absolutely justifies the R&D, the development, the launch, and the support of one product set, or solutions or offering set. So that piece is the aggregated viewpoint of the voice of the customer, is very important, and it also gives the CEO the confidence to and the chips, the clout, or to, if sales product still has this thing about, I want to go do this, X and Y is really what the customers want. The customer can say, or the CEO can say, listen, I'd love to do it too, but 20 of our biggest customers said they don't need it. They're not going to pay for it. So let's go. What can we do with X, and maybe get them there? I can tell you that part of the conversation has saved so many CEOs political clout, disruption among the LT, money, and credibility with the market. So that piece, and if you only needs to happen one time, it happens that one time, you've got that CEO, they're totally bought in. You're going to keep them excited about the programs. And I can tell you what, head of product who sometimes they get a little more myopic about what they think the market needs. You have to have those checkpoints with the right level within your customer base. Either brag about Oracle when they did it and a couple others, but I can only talk about the ones that we can go publicly. Was users wanted all these changes, and so did the second level. But when you got to the CFOs of these companies, they weren't going to fund any of it. They're like, yeah, you can say it's more efficient, but what we're paying the folks and what they're doing down there, it's efficient enough. Instead of doing this, we need these changes. So where the CFO is talking to about the ERP system, they're like, I know this is what the user feedbacks are telling you. Yeah, that one point, number 3, that's very important to us. But points 1 and 2, that's not going to move the needle from us from a business standpoint. So focus on these things, and where the money's coming from. So where are you going to make your investments? So you can do some type of feature and functionality, on UIs and whatnot. But at the end of the day, what's going to move the needle for the CFO is I'm getting this real-time data and it's banging up against this or whatever. So you get that clarity of 20 customers telling you at a C level, I'll buy that module if you do this. So that's really lined up on this. I can't say that enough when I look at these. And then again, we're tying all this to scorecards. So all the functional areas, all the way down to customer service, we're benchmarking everything, showing that we get an ROI to this CAB. Next up. I think we talked about who should participate. The only thing I would just say is sometimes you do get people who like to hear themselves speak and want to sell at these meetings. You really need to do it through questions that you ask and not just do that. I had a client one time where 8 of the executives talked in a row, basically having a debate among themselves, not even thinking the customers were there. And boy, when I did my debrief with their customers, they just lit the place up. They were not happy about it at all. And they were ready to walk after day one because they were so into talking about themselves, thought they had the answer, or shoving products and services down their throats. And they were very much offended. So make sure you're good listeners, we're writing notes, we're following up with questions, not getting defensive. And facilitating so everybody has an opportunity around the table to talk. You're always going to have some weighted because there's more quiet people, but by and large, giving everybody an opportunity to have input. Next up.
Real quick,
Yeah.
I think you've talked about this in a previous call, but when you're gearing up for this CAB meeting, I think you've talked about in the past, selecting certain customers who are going to be attending.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the best practices in collecting their buy-in and their questions and making sure that what they want on the agenda is included? And maybe you're planning to talk about that, but I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Absolutely. So next up is who do you want at the table from a customer standpoint? That's really important. Amy, I'll get to what we have to make it meaningful for both parties. So if you go to the next slide, please.
Awesome.
All right. So, who do you want at the table? You want people that whatever you're doing is relevant enough to them. So if they're the CIO and you have a risk solution, I'm not sure that the topic is broad enough for them. So you might want a chief risk officer instead. So remember, what you do needs to be probably, it needs to be significant enough to that individual and to that level or that function. So that's some level that's really what you have to have. Then you sell it to the customers by saying you have a seat at the table with your peers. You get a chance to trade ideas. You have access to our execs, rotating membership, so you're not on forever. We'll let you go in 2 or 3 years, so you get in, you get out, and then there's some level of reward participation. Now, I'm not a big fan of paying them. What I am a fan of is donating to a charity on their behalf. So everybody has these, charities that are important to them. So as long as it's a 501c3, well, we're going to give you your honorarium is going to go to a charity of your choice. It makes it great. And I think it makes people feel good that they're coming in, helping each other, helping themselves, and then also obviously doing something good for a charity. So that's what's going to get, design it so you can, who do you want at the table, then you want to go after them. Next up. When I position it to customers, and I think I just talked a little bit about that, but you've got to strike, a balance of we're not going to talk for a breakfast and then go golfing all day long or do something like that. That it's a very much meaningful, substantive day that we're going to have, but we're also going to give time for for everybody to get to know each other. So when they come back for the next meeting, I like to think of it as if you have the impact where they feel like it's almost like a reunion, um, then you've really got something special because they feel like they're doing something bigger than themselves, and they've got an opportunity to really bring the right people on board to make that happen, and they're accomplishing something together, and I don't know. That's really special. And we get a lot of comments. Why do you want to stay on this council? And people come back to us and tell us that's the reason why, is because they feel like I'm making a difference. People care, and the way that it's facilitated, you're taking what we say seriously and applying it. Can't do everything, and can't do it. Just tell us why not. But where we need to help, you're doing it, and you're actually you have a scorecard. You're tracking these items, so it doesn't go down in a black hole and never come out. Next slide is just kind of like we've done this, and we've done it about 3 or 4 different times. About every 5 years, we'll do this, and they typically the results come out to about the same, which is how do you get them to come? The big thing is I would say you wanted it a hub city. People don't want to take 2 flights someplace. Put it in a nice location. You want to treat them right. If you can align it with an industry event with the first meeting or two to get them on board and to get their buy-in, I do that. About half cover transportation cost. I'm not a big fan of spousal programs or honorariums. I'd mentioned that before. And then you do want to have some level of leisure or social where people can get to know each other. So it could just be we're all cooking dinner together, something that is just a little more people can go in and at the end of the day have a cocktail or just talk and do something together, get to know each other on a personal level.
Hey, Sean, have you seen any recent ballpark figures on how much a really, effective program cost? I know that I saw another company talk about this recently, and they were talking about 100 to 150, and that's with 15 cab members and 12 members of their leadership team. But have you seen any numbers more recently on, what you should expect to pay for something like this, like a real formal cab program?
Yeah, that's about right. I would say if you're at about a 3.5 star property, and I don't think you need to go, I don't go overboard. A nice Marriott, upscale Marriott, is good. When people see Ritz Carlton or they're seeing these real exclusive places, to the people on their team, it's like, okay, this is a boondoggle. So it's got to be a block and tackle. It could be a cut above. You're at C suites. I mean, you can go a little above that, but typically, I'm that number. So you're looking about 25 people. 25 people, I would say you want to allocate somewhere between $3,000 and $4,000 a person. Uh, and if you're looking at, yeah, so that's about what I would venture to work with. If you put it on, if you're really in budget tight, you want to make it happen, I would go in a day before a industry conference, and do that so you're not paying for travel. You really get out of that. You just give them an honorarium and donate to a charity, and you might pick up one room night, but you don't have to pick up their flights. So there are some ways to do it. You have to be shorter because people aren't going to they're going to stay for 2 days on the front end of a conference, but they will give you probably a 3/4 of a day, and that's all I would expect. And it really depends on East Coast, West Coast, but that's what I would ballpark it. And you can cut that fee down significantly if you can front end it on the front end of a industry conference. All right, next slide. This is pretty straightforward. I think we've talked a little bit about this. I would just say I could go into this slide for 45 minutes alone, but I would say get a great facilitator, vet your people, and set the expectation of what you really want. You don't want it to be a complaint session. No problem if you point out a complaint or something that's not going right. Make sure that gets council wide. Yes, this is an issue. If it's not, have the account manager. We'll have the account manager deal with you on a one-on-one basis. But if it is, tell us why. And so I always say, somebody says this is going wrong. The last one was cross regional contracts for a global company. Everybody agreed there was an issue. Wasn't the issue on pricing? The way they were structured in each one of them, they had to sign all these different contracts. So we were able to go to the global and have much more of a global agreement on companies that operated in 2 or more regions. And it went over really, really big. But we were able to get to that, then focus on solving the problem together and with an outcome to make that happen. So at the end of the day, no problem saying something's going wrong. Then find out it's validated as board wide. Then go deep dive into solving it, not making it, not sitting there coming out of there with a, Debbie Downer approach. Let's get to the more positive pieces of how can we solve this problem. And they're there because they want to make business, easier to do business with each other. So there's a mutual benefit to making that happen. And then other things is just, obviously different viewpoints, different regions, different functions. If you are touching those within your customer base, is having those different viewpoints, different industries represented. Some are highly regulated, like telco or pharma, and then others aren't highly regulated. So sometimes you just want to be able to mix these audiences depending on your customer mix. And if we go to the next slide, I would tell you this, the frustrated client, it's really going off the rails. Leave them out of the first meeting, especially if they're vocal about it. And we've had a lot of people that were upset, but we knew who they were, and they'd said their peace of mind, and they went into meetings. They were great. The relentless salesperson or bragging about how good they are, and even the internal people that want to do that, we've got to coach them up front, or just leave them out of the first meeting, because they can steamroll people and the conversation. And before we can get a hold of them and essentially provide a slight correction to them, then I've got 2 members that have already decided I'm not coming back. And this is more for the internal people a lot as well, because they can really steamroll you. But the other thing I would say is the old person that's 3 years away from retirement, you don't want them. They don't want change. They want to, they want to leave the way they're doing. Not to say there's not an exception, but they're just out to really have a good time. And they usually bring their spouse, and they cut out because they don't really want to make new relationships. So the young, eager, or mid-level, midstream in it, they're going to come out. They're going to be much more committed to what you're doing. Next up, and I think this is where Amy, you asked this question a little bit earlier. The content piece. Next slide. I'm on. Where are we here?
I'm on 24.
24. Yeah. Okay. So on 24 would be. I'm just going to give you some block and tackle on this. We'll answer this, I think, in the next few questions. So how long should the meeting be? Where should you hold it? Whatnot. If you go to the next slide, this is a sometimes people think they don't really think ahead, and this is what they get. So I would just say know where you want to get. If I'm sending out notices in the fall and they're thinking about February, I'm thinking about maybe South Florida or Arizona. And I'm not thinking about Vegas in August or something like that. And you'd be surprised how many people, the location in a hub city is where I definitely would do it. And the one thing you have to avoid a lot of these holidays, and those would include long weekends from and graduations. So just be sensitive to that. But essentially, the spring and the fall are the times to have the best meeting. Um, I would say the end of January to mid March are really good. May is a great time, believe it or not, because it's really shoulder time, with the exception of college just getting out. And then the fall, once you get past Labor Day, it's great all the way to essentially mid-November. And then surprisingly enough, the week after Thanksgiving and the first week of December are great weeks to have it because people are winding down anyway and they're looking for a way to just kind of look like they're busy. So I think you can get away and make that happen. If you go to the next slide, these are more logistics. I know, Amy, you brought up the numbers. Those are about right. Those are right. We're seeing 1 to 2 days, depending on who they are. So I can do, you come in one evening, you have a happy hour. And then depending on where you are, if you're on the West Coast, I would bring them all in the morning. You have a lunch, you do a half a day, you have a nice social activity that night. Next day, you do a half a day, they fly out. So you get something pretty, on the East Coast, they got to fly in the night before. Essentially, you have a reception, and then you do an all day with a social event, half day the next day, then they leave. So I'm a big fan of starting with. Used to be a fan of making sure there's 12 or 15. Um, Here are your ratios of everybody you ask. If you do it the right way, 2/3 to 75% are going to say I'll join. Of those people that say they're going to join, 2/3 will come to each meeting. So that's what you have to, the ratios you have. So if I want 10 people at this meeting, all right, I need to have 15 people on the board and I need to recruit about 20 to 22. So that'll put 10 to 12 cheeks in seats, each meeting. So if that's the number you're looking for, that's how you reverse engineer what you want to do.
Hey, Sean, since we've got about 10 minutes left, can we transition over to what are some of the other options other than formal CAB programs that involve executive engagement, like the tabs and the customer-led advisory boards and other types of executive engagement, ambassador types of things that some of the companies who may not have meet the requirements to throw on a successful program could be considering as options to engage their best customers.
Let me see here.
And if you don't
Yeah.
have a slide on it, we can.
So I'm a big Summit fan. I think that summits can be a precursor to a council. So if I don't have a lot of relationships, for instance, strong relationships with my customer base at a high level, and that happens a lot, especially mid-market companies or smaller organizations. What I would do is do a summit, and you want to bring in marquee, so get 2 or 3 of your big customers at a high level to come in and speak. I call them anchor tenants, like a mall or what we used to call malls. That'll attract people, and then the next level down, you or other people you ask to come in and be panelists and whatnot. And I would have roundtables where basically I'm leading the facilitation again. I'm facilitating this. What the big difference in most summits are, we're talking Adam all the time, thought leadership and whatnot. They still want to have that dialogue, and I would restructure the summits like that to make it kind of part summit and thought leadership, but also dialogue, where we're having the dialogues and transition that. If you do that, you'd be really surprised. And then you follow up with, hey, and you get a chance to observe it. Your team would say, I really like what Amy and Mary said, and Phil and Michaela. And so let's see if we can, would you folks be interested at your various companies coming and joining us to have roundtables. Well, sure, because we all just got together and we learned from each other. We're all excited about it. We'll formalize, we'll sponsor that. So there's your springboard off of a summit into an advisory council. And for small and mid-sized companies, or even companies that don't are launching a new area, I would highly advise that because it works. It's also a lot less costly, and you're controlling it. But then you get a chance to vet the people up front, and you're getting their buy-in because they get to see how you operate, and it's going to be a much easier yes transitioning into you guys want to get together. Essentially you're like, you want to get together again, okay, and then what if we put some structure behind it? Maybe once every 6 or 8 months we get together. Oh, okay. And then it's an easy, very much of an easy. We've done that with tons of smaller companies that no, they didn't even know the names of the people buying. They were going through purchasing, and we were trying to get around that. So that's a big piece. The ambassador one, and they turn into ambassadors. Quite frankly, so I guess that's one. I'm a big fan of that, and then the exec sponsor programs. I'm a big fan of that, and I know we're limited on time from that standpoint. I don't want to kind of go down a path I can't give enough substance to, but uh, uh, any questions around? I mean, I'd love to spend. I know we're close to the end here, and I saw a lot of things pop up on the screen, but I didn't get a chance to read them. Collectively, Amy, is there any themes out there that we
Um,
want to address?
One of the areas that I think a lot of folks were interested in is just like coming up with the strategy and the content design, and maybe some pointers on how to work with the internal stakeholders to make that work.
Yeah, I've got some really nice templates. If there are people that want to do that, I'd be happy to take them through that in about 30 minutes and then give them some templates. If somebody would like to do that, shoot me a note through Amy or whatnot, because I can walk you through these, and then you can take those and use them as you'd like. But we're pretty generous with a lot of this, and help you over some of these humps. And I understand, where people are just, I don't have money, I don't have this. Listen, I want you to be a success, because the more successful you are there, then you can take that to the next level. You getting buy-in, and who knows down the road. But if you're at a couple stumbling blocks, wherever that is in the process, shoot me a note. I mean, I'm happy to even have a 5-minute conversation and maybe send something to you that can help you over that hump. We've
Well,
done
Sean, I think
hundreds of
there's
these.
been a consensus that we want to schedule a part two. And because there's so much good content here. So I think what I'll do, and I'll work with Mary, is to collect some of the maybe some of the topics and the like talking about the templates that we didn't cover today.
Yeah,
Maybe have you come back and we'll do a part two.
yeah.
And I think that would be really helpful. And I think a lot of folks here would really appreciate that.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to sell, but I'm just saying if you're in a position where you really need to do something heavy, I do have a quick program that I can take you from the beginning all the way to the end, and it's all template driven. But I can take you. We do 3 calls and we go through that. If somebody's in it, otherwise, I'm happy to do it over the course of time. I'm just saying if somebody's in a position where they need that now, let me know, and I'm happy to walk them through it. But Amy, Mary, happy to come back and do something that we can take chunks of this and go deeper.
That would be awesome. I think everybody here is very happy and really appreciate all this. I told everybody up front,
Yeah.
you're the expert. And I mean, when I say that I've remembered the tips that you shared with
Yeah.
us many years ago, I mean, this is so helpful because I know a lot of people are struggling trying to figure out just how to get started or how to go to the next steps. And I think cabs have evolved over the years, and just by hearing from you on what works and what doesn't work, I mean, to me, and I know a lot of folks here are, just really appreciative of the time that you've given today. So I think what we'll do
Yeah.
is,
If I could leave with one
yeah,
thought,
yeah,
and that
absolutely.
is, listen, I get it because you get one shot at really blowing your exec team away. And then ultimately they trust you to handle their most important customers. That's a 1-2 punch. And if you deliver on that, you'll skyrocket. Your visibility goes up disproportionately within the organization. And so if you're on that cusp, you're close to doing that, do it right. And that's why we can spend a little time talking about it, because I want you to be a success. I really do. And happy to have another session where we go over some of these things. So, but thank you for having me.
Oh, well, thank you. Mary, do you have any suggestions on how we want to collect questions and schedule a follow-up?
No, actually, it's really easy to collect the questions and stuff because I have it all set up to save the chats. Um, and anybody who wants to save the chat, just click the three dots at the top of the chat area and click Save Chat. And yeah, we can schedule something with Sean if he's open to it. He can come back and say he's not after the call. That's fine. It's hard to say no when so many people are saying, come back, come back. But thank you
A
so
lot of
much, both of you.
pressure.
Yeah, both of you for doing this and breaking this down as far as we got into your deck. I'm so interested in the rest too, but we only have an hour
Yeah.
and but yeah, we'd love to have you back. And okay, Shelley, I'll take care of that for you. Um,
So
and I'll follow up with you,
I'll
Amy.
work with you, Mary, on collecting some questions, and Sean, I'll touch base with you and see what your availability is, because I know that everybody here would love to have a part 2 and maybe spend some time on understanding how the template piece works and some of the other things that we didn't get to today.
You got it. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a
Thank you.
great weekend.
Everyone have a good week. Next
Bye.
week, we are talking about software negotiations. So I said no vendors, just people that are in the community. No, none of our like community vendors. And we're going to talk about negotiations. Fun. I'll see you all
Yeah.
next week.
Mary.
Bye.
Bye.